John, you mentioned that the virus hasn't changed a lot, or at least we're hearing that the virus hasn't genetically changed a lot. But you mentioned that there were a couple of different clades or a couple of different, you know, instances of different strains of this virus that are circulating. Could you tell us what the implication of both the first and the second of those two things are, and what that means in terms of our fight against monkeypox?
Yeah, so from what's known about monkeypox, there are basically two general divisions that can be made based on their genetics. But there's monkeypox that circulates in Western Africa, Nigeria, and west of that, which David mentioned. There's also monkeypox that is genetically different that circulates in the Democratic Republic of Congo and areas around that. And they appear to have different severity. In the West Africa clade is what is currently known to be circulating around the world, and that is the less pathogenic strain. So that's very encouraging if you just think about it in terms of if we could have gotten one or other clade of monkeypox, we would have chosen this if we could. We'd rather not have either, but if we have one, the West Africa clade has been the less pathogenic strain so far.
Can I add something? I think it's important, actually. I'm sort of thinking about transmission and what we know about this disease. And besides a few sporadic cases that have occurred related to travel to Central and West Africa, we did have a monkeypox outbreak in the United States a few years ago that were associated with prairie dogs. And that came from an infected animal or animals that came from West Africa. And there was cross-infection, I think, at pet shops. And then people were sort of buying prairie dogs to have as pets. And their kids and the family members were handling them and then developing pox, basically the monkeypox. And that eventually was controlled by identifying the animal reservoir, isolating people, and really did no great harm. So we've dealt with this before, but it also sort of raises the point that anybody can become infected, and at least if it's the West African strain, it does appear to be pretty mild. And we should probably talk a little bit about we do have some. There's two vaccines available for prevention, not necessarily post-exposure prophylaxis, although one of them could be used if given early. And then there are a couple treatments that are really designed for smallpox, but probably will work well against monkeypox.
Before you go there, though, I do want to drill in on this point about what CDC said last Friday, I believe, about the fact that there are a couple of different sequences of the cases that are available in the US. There are a couple of different sequences. What is the importance of that finding? What does that tell us?
So the importance of that finding is it tells us a little something about how all the transmission got started. It argues that there were two separate introduction events and not just one. And the reason that it's helpful to have the genomics to understand what's going on is when you understand whether this was just a one-off event or whether there were more than that, it tells you something about the apparent risk. The fact that there were two separate introductions suggests that there is a little more risk than if there was just one.
Yeah, and I think it also, to my point, after hearing that, the concern that I had was maybe these events that David mentioned were amplifiers, but that, as he very astutely mentioned, the fact that there are sequences that have been circulating, we're finding cases so quickly that potentially there was a low-level transmission that was ongoing for a while in both Europe and the US. We don't know, I guess, when. Would you guys agree with that assessment?
I mean, from what we know so far from the initial sequencing of strains that's been done and sort of trying to piece it together, I think there is a suggestion of at least two separate introductions, and that this may have been here longer than we thought. I mean, when this first started, or when it was first identified, I was actually at a meeting in Madrid with a GeoSentinel meeting, and one of our site directors from London said, "Oh, we've had a couple of cases and they're being very secretive about it." And then it exploded over the next week. And it probably had been going on for much longer than just start in early May.